Hello, everyone. Well, that was a nice introduction. I could talk about history, I suppose, and how it affects the quality of our debate. I've actually planned to talk about what you've been talking about this morning, as far as I know, about the Gulf War. And I'll try and involve historical interpretations in that context. It was very interesting to see what was going on in the conference this morning. I was particularly impressed by your Skype links to people who are actually involved in the conflict. I was interested to see that both, was it just the two? They were both from where? Where were they? Kuwait, yes. So what would that tell us about our historical interpretation of the conflict? Which version of history are we getting from these people? Yes?
Kuwaiti's point of view, it can be biased.
It could certainly, but perfectly legitimate. And I think the first thing to understand about trying to explain events like the Gulf War is that there will always be different biased points of view. There is not one truth. And certainly there are lots of untruths told for various reasons. There are lots of different points of view. And history is a bit like a jigsaw. It's made up of lots of millions, even billions, of little pieces that historians try and find out, this little piece, and try and put them together into a picture. And we never get the whole picture. We just get an approximation of a jigsaw puzzle. So, what I plan to do, I plan to just give some facts about the Gulf War, outline the events that you were talking about this morning as I understand them, because I don't know the whole truth either. I only know what I read. I wasn't there. I was alive at the time. When were you born, Mr. United Kingdom? So, yes. So you were around for the second Gulf War, weren't you? Round 2. Yes, do you remember that? No. Does anyone remember round 2? 2003?
Yes.
Kuwait, well you must because you were in Kuwait. Yes. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give an outline of events in the Gulf War, and then I'm going to talk about what's happened since. And then I'm going to look at perhaps the deeper historical roots of the conflict. And then I'm going to try and bring out some different interpretations about the conflict. Because certainly people disagree strongly about that war. In the 1991, I remember, there were massive demonstrations in places like the United Kingdom, even in the United States, against the war. And you've got to ask why. Why? It's not a simple case of one country invading another country. There are bigger issues at stake to do with US policy, the role of the United Nations, war crimes. What is a war crime? Are some people's lives more valuable than other people's lives? It's estimated that more children in Iraq, more children in Iraq died as a result of sanctions in the 1990s than have been killed by weapons of mass destruction in the whole of the 20th century. Those were United Nations sanctions. Again, I ask you, this brings up wider questions. Why are some lives worth more than others? Why do some deaths make the news, other deaths do not? What is so important that hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children can be killed? Anyway, that will bring me to the end of my lecture when I'll talk about issues that you should consider perhaps and questions to ask. And then you can ask questions of me and each other. But firstly, a brief summary of events around the time of the Gulf War in 1991. And I'll start in 1988 with the end of the Iran-Iraq War. It was a savage war probably one of the most futile conflicts that I can think of in the 20th century. Anyway, by August 1988, there was a ceasefire. And it was monitored, this ceasefire was to be monitored by UNIMOG, the United Nations International Military Observation Group. By 1990, and at the end of this war, Iraq was in debt, massive debt, to her neighbours Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, to the tune of something like $24 billion from Saudi Arabia, $17 billion from Kuwait. There was domestic instability within Iraq. There were shortages. There was inflation. Now, there have been long-standing disputes between Iraq and Kuwait. Long-standing, going way back. But recent issues at that time served to bring those long-term issues to a head in 1990. These issues were to do with territory. It was claimed that during the war, Kuwait took about 2 miles of Iraqi territory. They moved the border into the, I think it was the Ramallah, or into an oil field. It's to do with oil. Kuwait was accused of drilling oil in Iraqi territory. They were accused of slant drilling into Iraqi territory. They were accused of benefiting from Iraqis' conflict against Iran. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, run by rich, unelected, undemocratic families, the Sauds, the Al-Sabahs in Kuwait, were and still are very scared of what was happening in Iran, which was a popular, militant Islamic revolution. They did not want that to spread. So they funded the Iraqi conflict against Iran. When, after the ceasefire happened, they demanded rapid repayment of those debts from Iraq, from Saddam Hussein. They were also accused of driving down the price of oil on the world market by selling oil, Kuwaiti oil, very cheaply, therefore bringing down the price of oil so the Iraq could not sell its oil at a higher price, and therefore could not repay its debts. Now, no one is painting Saddam Hussein here to be an angel. He's a monster. He always was. But certainly, by 1990, Saddam Hussein felt he was being pushed into a corner. Without United States discouragement, he moved troops to the border of Kuwait. About 30,000 troops, it is said. A week before the conflict, the invasion, he actually met with the US ambassador in Baghdad, Gillespie, who assured Saddam Hussein that the United States would not intervene in the event of an invasion of Kuwait. Troops were moved there either to invade or to apply diplomatic pressure through the threat of military action. It's difficult to tell. Now, why would a small country like Kuwait risk war, invasion, by a much more powerful neighbour like Iraq? Unless they knew something. Unless they had been given assurances that they might receive the support of a great power, namely the United States. Yes, the United Nations passed resolutions, but let's be clear. This was an American invasion. They constituted 73% of the invasion force, and it's very difficult to imagine that the invasion could have taken place with US opposition. They could have vetoed it in the Security Council, as they have done many times. So, what happened? On the 2nd of August 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. There were stories in the Western media, many of them true, you've heard them today, about tortures, Iraqi atrocities. Terrible stories in the media. We'll think about the role of the media in moving public opinion later in the lecture. The UN Security Council passed a resolution 660 calling for full withdrawal. On the 6th of August, they passed another resolution 661 imposing economic sanctions on Iraq. These economic sanctions would be used again in the 1990s after the first Gulf War. And the casualties of those sanctions that I talked about before would take place. The 8th of August, Iraq announced that the two countries, Kuwait and Iraq, were now one. They would merge. Now, that resolution 660, threatening military action, also left room for negotiation, however. Left room for a diplomatic negotiated solution over the issues of access to the sea, to the Persian Gulf for Iraq. Kuwait, geopolitically, is very important, and we'll come to that when we talk about Great Britain and why Kuwait was created. Access to the sea, access to the Persian Gulf. That's an issue that Saddam Hussein was hoping to negotiate about. They also wanted to talk about the border dispute between the two countries. Diplomatic routes suggested by the Arab League, by France, even in December 1990 by Saddam Hussein himself, who offered to make a full withdrawal on the condition that his forces would not be attacked, were blocked in the United Nations by Washington. In November 1990, Resolution 678 authorised the use of force to displace Iraq from Kuwait. There followed a rapid, massive build-up of military hardware, of 500,000 US troops. Eventually there would be about 956,000 troops from 34 countries, 73%, as I said, from the USA. Now, think about it. If you move that many troops into a situation very quickly, you don't keep that many troops costing, about $5 billion a month on standby. They're not there as a deterrent. They're there to be used. And they were used very quickly. This was a conflict that the coalition forces were bound to win.